We apologise for interrupting your programming. We're going to some live pictures now. This is the scene near Deir Hafer in Syria. This is a town that has been a stronghold of SDF forces, Syrian Democratic Forces. It has just been announced and reported by the Syrian army that they have managed to retake control of this area. It was announced that a withdrawal by SDF forces was to begin about 4 hours ago at 4 GMT. As we heard about an hour ago, that withdrawal had been underway. And in just moments ago, the Syrian army announced it now has control of the area. This appears to be people walking along a road. We know that humanitarian corridors have been opened in a number of areas, including around Deir Hafer in recent days, encouraging civilians who can to leave the area in case of a resumption of fighting. About 150,000 people have left Deir Hafer and surrounding areas through those corridors as they've become available. But the clashes have also killed a number of civilians as well. The army entered the area on Saturday morning. It says it's now securing the area and clearing it of mines. The Syrian army also said it would not target SDF troops as they pulled out. The agreement between the two groups was that the SDF would start moving east across the Euphrates River. We can see the movement there of cars carrying people in the boot there, walking by foot. There is still a number of people who are leaving the area, both SDF and, one would imagine, some civilians as well. This news that the Syrian army has been announced by Syrian TV that the army has managed to take control. We do have reporters and correspondents in Syria. Let's go now to Zain Bazravi, who joins us from Aleppo. And Zain, this declaration happening perhaps a little quicker than we had expected with the announcement the SDF only a few hours ago were to begin their withdrawal.
That is correct. From the Syrian government perspective, this is most likely to be seen as a best-case scenario. They built up a number of troops around Deir Hafer here in the Aleppo governorate. We're just a stone's throw from Hamaima village, where we spent the last few days watching this humanitarian corridor, watching the Syrian government build up its troops in the area with a view to doing what it is doing now behind me. We're seeing another division from the Aleppo governorate, Division 60, now moving in across this roadblock that's been here for days in towards Deir Hafer, a short drive away. We've seen a number of vehicles, buses carrying soldiers, anti-aircraft guns mounted on trucks, tactical vehicles of that kind, a number of soldiers on motorcycles, more firepower going in to reinforce the Syrian units that have already been reinforcing positions around Deir Hafer, now to secure and clear this latest liberated area. And that is how the government will be seeing this, as yet another liberation of another SDF stronghold. Two major strongholds in 2 weeks, coming back under the control of the central government in Damascus. This area has become a hub of activity. It was much quieter here just a few hours ago. Yesterday, we did not see so much traffic moving this way. Journalists and aid groups and civilians are still being stopped at this roadblock while military convoys continue to move in. We see a family there trying to get in, most likely being turned around. What the officials here, what the military is telling us, is that until the area is cleared and secured, that means they're going to do what they did in Aleppo, which is make sure that there are not unexploded ordnances, make sure that there are not any mines, anything that would be unsafe for people returning to what are essentially civilian areas that were under SDF control for several years, now once again back under government control. They want to make sure it's safe enough for people to go back. Thousands have left this area, and the hope is that people can get them back, the military can clear those areas and get people back into their homes, back into a normal life as soon as possible. But this massive movement of yet another reinforcement of Syrian troops indicates something, that this clearing operation is not over. Aleppo governorate in a whole is not under government control as yet. There are still pockets of SDF in the northeast of the country, and this reflects the ongoing ambition of the government in Damascus, which is to have a single unified country, a single unified military, and to continue to clear out any remnants of any parallel fighting force what the government has said is that Syria, for all Syrians, is possible. But what they will not tolerate is any parallel fighting force. That means the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, any sort of separatist movement, any sort of parallel military is something that the government in Damascus will not tolerate, and they will use force, if needed, to push that out.
Zain, my apologies. First, we said you were in Aleppo, but you've moved since we last spoke to you. So you are now at the heart of where this is all happening, and it's quite a queue of cars already there. Tell us a little bit more about, we've spoken previously about the humanitarian corridors and the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who've had to try and move quite quickly and now are already hoping to return. This has been remarkably an issue that has not had such a high civilian casualty that we might have expected, given the delicate nature of the force withdrawing and of the army coming in and taking control.
That is correct. Last year, we saw government operations that resulted in high casualties. At least two occasions in 2025 where government operations did result in high casualties. And what the government understands is that that only makes it more difficult to accomplish this idea of a single Syria and to work towards stability, peace, rehabilitation after more than a decade of civil war. What we saw in Aleppo a week earlier were wide clashes that went on for days. These were lessons that they learned from. These were things the government did not want to repeat. There was an effort to try to bring the standoff.
My apologies. It seems we've just lost our coverage or our link there with Zain. We are hoping to get him back in just a moment. In the meantime, let's see if we can bring in Ayman Ogana. He's joining us from Damascus, and I'm hopeful that we have him down the line. Here he is, Ayman. All of this has been happening at an extraordinary time, the same time that President Sharar has signed a decree protecting Kurdish rights.
Yes, that's right. Last night, President Ahmed al-Sharaa issued a special decree guaranteeing national, linguistics and cultural rights to Syria's Kurdish population. Now, this comes at the backdrop of some fierce fighting between Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces and government troops, as Zain said, in Aleppo and the surrounding countryside. Now, the decree said Syrian Kurdish citizens are an integral and essential part of the Syrian people, and their linguistic and cultural identity is a part of Syria. The decree also said that Nowruz, the Kurdish festival, will be a national public holiday for all Syrians. Now, Syrian Kurds make up about 10% of the population, but they've long complained about discrimination, which this decree will reverse. Since 1962, many Syrian Kurds have been denied their citizenship and stripped of their citizenship. This decree will reverse that. Now, Syrian Kurds may make up 10% of the population, but they control nearly a quarter of the country, and the government is keen to share authority or get more authority of these Kurdish-controlled areas because they also contain the country's oil and wheat resources, as well as the territory they control. Syria's Syrian Democratic Forces have between 50 and 90,000 fighters, which the government wishes to integrate under a central authority. Now the issue of integration, has been the key sticking point and catalyst of this recent violence. The government wants the SDF to peacefully integrate under its authority and lay down its arms and hopes for an independent or completely autonomous region. So still a lot of issues and a vast chasm in differences. But we've spoken to many Kurds here, including Syrian Kurds in Damascus, who say they just want a peaceful solution after an exhausting 14 years of war in Syria.
Thank you, Ayman. That's Ayman Ogana joining us from the Syrian capital, Damascus. We're going to go back now to Zain Bazravi, who joins us east of Aleppo on the way to Deir Hafer. We lost him only temporarily. Zain, thank you so much. Can we talk then just a little bit about what Ayman was referring to? These Syrian Democratic Forces are, of course, Kurdish-led forces, with the president announcing those protections. What does this mean for the future of the SDF? Where are they withdrawing to, and what do we know?
Well, that certainly is the question that everybody's going to be asking now. We're really in this interim moment, in this limbo period. It really seems as though the government and the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces are trying to figure out how best to go about moving forward. But that momentum is on the government's side. It is clear from Damascus, clear from President Ahmed al-Sharaa, that the country will move forward. And that's what we're seeing playing out here. That's the momentum When you talk about the momentum politically in terms of policy, practically on the ground, this is what it looks like. We're seeing police units, military, government officials, all kinds of people moving in towards Deir Hafer to secure the government control of those former SDF strongholds, Deir Hafer, Maskana. What happens to the Kurds next? What happens to Syrian Kurds next? We got an indication of that from President Ahmed al-Shara in the announcement he made. And with this simultaneous two-pronged approach, speaking to civilians, talking about how Syrian Kurds are an important part of the future, while simultaneously, within minutes, launching this operation, a short, precise, but powerful, overwhelming use of military force in Deir Hafer overnight, launching this two-pronged approach of making a speech and then carrying out military activity. It really is a clear, singular message. What he's trying to do is draw a clear dividing line between Syrian Kurds, who he says have a future in Syria, but armed separatist groups, Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, armed fighters that function as a parallel fighting force in the country, they have no future. And it seems that there are stakeholders that are on board with this plan. We've seen the U.S. support for the new interim government in Damascus. Turkey, throughout the course of the last few weeks, has expressed support, political and...
My apologies. Our line to Zain appears to have just frozen for a moment there. If you've just joined us, we're looking at some pictures of recent developments around Deir Hafer in Syria. This was an SDF stronghold. There was an agreement about 4 hours ago that the SDF was to start withdrawing, and the Syrian army not long ago, an announcement on Syrian TV was made that the area has been secured by the Syrian army. We have correspondents in Syria, in Damascus and just outside of Deir Hafer, where we've seen a number of movements of troops, of police, military vehicles. The Syrian army announcing the area needs to be cleared of ordinances before civilians can return. Across the past few weeks, a number of humanitarian corridors have opened up in SDF strongholds as the Syrian army tries to reinforce control over those areas after decades of SDF control. Hundreds of thousands of people have fled their homes in the meantime. And, excuse me, the death toll has also been rather significant in a number of different areas, including in and around Deir Hafer. This, though, was an operation carried out quite swiftly with a very low toll. We're going to go now back to Ayman Ogana, who is in Damascus. And Ayman, as we were talking to Zain just there, it seems very unclear, although there is definitely a political will and a political move to reinforce Kurdish rights, the Kurdish-led SDF, for all its future, we are still very unclear as to where those soldiers are going and what the next step will be.
Yes, that's right. I mean, the Kurdish-led Syrian SDF are Kurdish-led, but they don't take up the majority of the forces. It's a broad church. The Kurds are about 30%. The SDF also contains Arabs, Turkmen, and Assyrians. Now, getting these forces separated might be an issue of the government, which might be why President Ahmed al-Shara appealed to minorities and the Kurdish people, and not simply the SDF. But the root cause of this fighting for the last few weeks remains unresolved. That is namely the peaceful integration of SDF forces into government institutions. Now, back in March, a so-called historic deal was reached between the SDF and the government. That was said to see the SDF integrate by the end of 2025. Obviously, we're well into the new year and fighting has broken out. So this issue really needs to be resolved. There's a lot of differences between the SDF's position and Damascus, but there's some hope that foreign powers might be able to mediate between the two, as the two have failed domestically so dramatically. Of all the foreign powers with the key important strategy and relationships to mediate, the US is perhaps the best place. The US has enjoyed a very strong relationship with the SDF for over a decade. They've armed them, they've equipped them, they've fought alongside them against ISIL and still have 900 troops in SDF-controlled territory. These troops even came to Deir Hafer yesterday to help de-escalate the situation and facilitate a peaceful solution. But the issue of integration remains a key wound that is not going to be resolved anytime soon unless a big effort is made by both parties and foreign mediators to de-escalate what is a worrying situation in the country.
Ayman Ogana joining us from Damascus. Thank you very much. We're going to go back now to Zain Basravi, who joins us from just outside Deir Hafer. Obviously, a link that is not as solid as we might have hoped, Zane, so we appreciate your patience with this. Can you, just for viewers joining us now, because it looks like a rather chaotic scene behind you, just give us an idea of what is happening on the ground there behind you since these SDF forces began their withdrawal 4 hours ago and the army announced that it now has control of this area?
Exactly. This area has become a real hub of activity this morning. It wasn't like this 24 hours ago. Since 7 a.m., when the SDF announced that it would be pulling out of strongholds it has held for years in Deir Hafer, in Maskana, leaving these areas, we've seen a number of vehicles carrying yet another reinforcement of Syrian military, local Aleppo governorate officials, as well as civilians trying to move across what has been a very tight cordon, a very tight roadblock, and make their way back into Deir Hafer. What we've seen in the last few days is a massive outflow since the fighting in Aleppo of 150,000 people. We've seen thousands leaving Deir Hafer. The issue that government officials here in the military want to deal with is displacement. There has continued to be internal displacement of enormous swathes of communities in civilian areas like Aleppo, like Deir Hafer, and the key now will be to get those people the resources they need to get back into their homes. But at the moment, what the military is telling us, the Division 60 from Aleppo that's been moving up this corridor towards Deir Hafer, all to reinforce a clearing operation to make sure there are no unexploded ordnance, no landmines, nothing left behind that would be unsafe for civilians to go back to. And what we are expecting that as those divisions move up to reinforce Syrian positions in Deir Hafer, what we are going to see is the convoy that went in days ago move forward to continue to pressure SDF armed fighters to continue to push them back. All of this to go along with a policy that Damascus has been clear about. There will be a singular Syria with one government and one unified military. Integration will happen, either through negotiation or, as we have seen, when negotiation doesn't work, the military is motivated to carry out military operations to try to make that policy a reality.
Zain Bazravi, thank you very much. Joining us from the outskirts of Deir Hafer, and Ayman Ogana from the Syrian capital, Damascus. Thank you both.